So today I am done with my yearly theme chat. Those are the 5 yearly themes that I remember. I've been doing it on and off for about 7 or 8 years, but there was a couple of years in there that I didn't have a yearly theme and a few that I don't remember either. So that is the end of the yearly theme stuff. So the question I have now in the last few days of the year is, what is my next yearly theme? And I don't know. I'm at another crossroads. I'm actually having the same experience I had last year, which is that I was pretty sure I knew what the yearly theme was, and for months I was pretty sure of that until I had a really great conversation with one of my friends recently, and it totally changed the way I was thinking about my yearly theme. And I'm not sure which yearly theme I'm going to go for. And I still am not sure. And I probably won't be sure on January 1st, but I will force myself to make a provisional decision because I'm totally happy with changing the year theme a couple weeks into January. And I've done this long enough to know that I can stick with a yearly theme, but I also have done this long enough to know that if you pick the wrong yearly theme, it can really change the trajectory of your life. There's a great quote from, I don't know who to attribute it to, but in systems of great power, small differences have enormous consequences. And something like a yearly theme, which will change the path of your life across a large trajectory, will change the direction of your life given the angle you calibrate it to. So I think it's really important to consider yearly themes seriously, and I do for many months. So what are the 2 yearly themes that I'm considering? The first one is one around this idea which I'm calling turning pro. So the idea of turning pro is from this book, The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield, which is that most people, when it comes to their work, especially art, they treat it like they're an amateur. And he doesn't mean amateur in a derogatory term. He means it the way that it was meant to be used. An amateur is someone who loves the thing. That's the root Latin of the word amateur, I believe, is someone who is a lover of that craft. But someone who loves the craft only does it when it calls to them, and a professional shows up every day and gets to work. And I've been really thinking about this idea that I could have a year where my disposition is to turn pro. And when I think about someone who turns pro, it's very different from someone who's on that grind set, because someone who turns pro, they're an athlete or they are a professional. And when I look at athletes, they aren't people who are, they are people who are on the grind set, but they are on the grind set in a really clear-eyed way. They really know what they're doing it for and why they are doing it. They don't just do the thing. This isn't like a whiplash situation where you sacrifice everything in your life in order to pursue one single goal. It's that athletes, they know what the pros and cons are of different things, and they are trying to configure their life to achieve a very specific, difficult to achieve outcome, and they dedicate their life towards it. And this disposition isn't something that I've ever tried to practice. I'm pretty happy living a chill, peaceful life where I don't really accept mediocrity, but I'm not really shying away from mediocrity. It's fine. I can just live a chill life and it's totally okay. But I also always wonder what would happen if I really just decided to go for it. If I really decided that this would be the year that there aren't going to be any more what ifs. I'm going to leave everything on the table and I'm going to try the hardest that I can try to achieve specific goals. I think I've always been trying to do a little bit of everything, and that means that I'm kind of good at a lot of things. I'm sort of a jack of all trades, but I've never done the thing that an athlete does, which is they pick a discipline or a craft or a sport and they say, this is the thing that I'm really trying to achieve greatness in, and they go for it. They figure out what their potential really is because they leave everything on the table. And that's never something that I've ever done. And reading this book and thinking about how the next 2 years of my life are going to go, or the next year of my life is going to go, I really think about the projects that I have coming up. And I realize that for me, this might be the perfect year to do something like a year called Turning Pro, because I have this incredible focus for a couple of the projects that are coming up in 2026, which I can't really talk about. But the thing that gives me is this excitement to just get to work. I'm really excited about the year that I have coming up and the things that I'm going to be allowed to work on. And because of that, I have this itching towards a year where the disposition that I'm trying to train is a clear-eyed intensity towards specific goals. But the thing I want to say about turning pro as a year theme, and I've considered this, pretty deeply in the last few months is that it's not about work. Turning pro is a disposition that I'd like to cultivate towards my life, including my work, which is that I am clear-eyed and focused on the things that I'm trying to achieve. And some of that will look like being more caring towards my family or friends. And I will bring an athlete's mentality to that, in the sense that I will take it extremely seriously and configure my life and seasons of my life towards making sure that that is a top priority. I think that the thing that athletes are really good at, and people who I would consider to be pro at things are very good at, is really accepting that in order to achieve excellence in a specific field, they need to accept that other areas of their life are going to have to take the backseat. And it's not something that they let fall to the wayside without consideration. They accept that for a period of their life, this specific thing is going to have to be deprioritized in order to prioritize something else. And accepting the consequences of that and trying to mitigate, harmful or negative consequences of that is part of the way that they configure their life. And it's not about having the whiplash. I keep going back to whiplash, but the whiplash mentality of, all right, burn everything, I'm going to do this at all costs. It's actually trying to configure your life where you have periods where you are on the on cycle. An on season for an athlete is an extremely intense period of work, but the off season will be an intense period of rest. And I think both of these things are incorporated in this idea of turning pro. It's the focus that you would get from not treating your work or your life like an amateur, which is someone who shows up when they feel like it, and showing up consistently because you have a commitment to yourself and a commitment to the craft that you're trying to cultivate, or the task that you're trying to cultivate, or the opportunity or the outcome you are trying to achieve. So these are all the reasons why I was really thinking that next year could be a year where the theme is turning pro. I mean, this project was started because of that theme specifically. I was thinking, look, if next year I'm going to get really serious about making great art again and go past anything that I've ever made before and just make some of the best stuff that I could ever make. And what I need to get really good at talking to camera. And the best way to do that is just to rip the Band-Aid and start publishing every single day on this channel and get really good at just articulating myself. And that's what this project was for. It was for potentially this theme of turning pro. Like, what would it look like to just get the reps in? And that's what this entire theme was about. So that's the theme that I think I was going to do, or thought I was going to do. And I'm not sure anymore. I had this conversation about this alternative theme, and I'm just not sure if that's the one that I want to go with. Maybe I will talk about that tomorrow. But I had this idea of trying to cultivate a disposition around the athletic performance that you see in sports. But I didn't really understand why that couldn't be translated into all other areas of your life. I've been reading about and watching documentaries around athletes in the last few months in a way that has been really interesting, because I see this soul-focused intensity, but I also see a level of discipline that I don't think I've ever had. And I understand that is extremely transferable. I know lots of people in my own life who are not athletes, but they have this intense discipline that they are willing to show up for things to achieve specific outcomes. And I really liked the idea of not having the what if of what does it look like to try and achieve your true potential in specific areas of your life. And in order to do that, deprioritizing other areas of your life for specific and short periods of life, and having a balance in the macro, but not in the micro, in the sense that maybe you have a couple weeks of intense work, but you also have intense periods of rest and connection with your family and community and friends. And in the micro, your days stop looking extremely balanced, which I think is more typical of a non-pro lifestyle. But in the macro, you can still have, if you zoom out, a year that feels balanced with seasons of highs in terms of work and intensity around the projects that you want to achieve, and low lows in terms of work, but high highs in terms of rest and relationships and community and all the rest of the areas of your life that you want to try and cultivate. So That was the idea around this year of turning pro, or this. I don't have a year of name for it. It's just turning pro, but I've started to have some cold feet around that, and I'm just not sure whether or not that is the theme for next year. It's strange because I was watching the video back yesterday around what the themes that I was battling with last year was, and one of them was this year of excellence, this idea that I would take a year to be dispositionally focused on trying to achieve. And it's coming back, that itch is coming back. And maybe that's a good thing. Like the itch to have this other theme continues to persist in my life. But I also think it's a really scary thing to really configure your disposition around a performance-related goal rather than something that feels a lot more intrinsic. And that's the hesitation that I have. How does this theme manifest in ways if I can't achieve great things? All of that to say, one of the things that I've found quite interesting in the last couple of months is to see Timothy Chalamet sort of express a lot of the same sort of thoughts. And it was interesting to watch because there was some discourse on Twitter about this, and I thought that was interesting as well, which is that Timothy Chalamet seems to be taking this extremely, what on Twitter was being called the Mamba mentality, which is this, it's a basketball meme, but basically this focus around athletics. He has that speech around, I'm really in pursuit of greatness, and that's what he's trying to do, and who knows if he'll get there, but he's very, very clear-eyed in the thing that he is trying to achieve, and he's just going for it. And that's not really something that you see in areas outside of sport in as brazen of a way as Timothy Chalamet is doing in his career. And I think that's interesting. I think it's interesting to see that, just as I was sort of circling around this year of turning pro and understanding that could be an interesting period of my life. The other thing to say around this is that I have treated September to December as the great lock-in, which is, again, a meme I saw in September, which is, instead of New Year, New You, why don't you meet a new you in January by locking in for September to December? And I think it's gone really well for me. I've really focused on the key areas of my life, and I've played around with this idea of turning pro. And I've really changed a lot about the way that I have operated over the last 3 months. And I think all of that is fantastic. And maybe that's what turning pro needed to serve. If I don't go with turning pro for the next year's theme, maybe I've just had a 3-month period where I had a mini theme. And that's something that I've done before in the past, had these mini seasons of sub themes that I've played around with. But I've never been able to maintain 2 themes at the same time for as long as a year. They've always been sort of a couple of months or a short challenge and things like that are underneath a broader arc of a yearly theme. So all of that to say, one of the options for next year is this turning pro idea, this idea of trying to take an athlete's mentality towards the rest of my life. And how would that really configure itself into a disposition? I don't know, but let's find out across a year. And I know I was going to sort of split this up and explain the second one, but I am traveling all of tomorrow. And so as a result, I'm going to need a video for tomorrow. And so I'm going to do a part 2 where I talk about the second option that I'm thinking about. And that will be tomorrow.